Well, hello and welcome to the Photo Brigade podcast. I'm Robert Caplin.
I'm Julius Constantine Motal.
Oh, well, I was supposed to introduce you, but that'll work. That way I don't screw up your name.
No, it's fine.
Very good. Well, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, too.
Thank you for dressing up.
Well, you know, I had to put on something this morning.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you dressing up for the podcast. It's very much appreciated.
Sure.
So, Julius, you and I have, I think we met at our monthly
The Beer and Wings.
networking event here in New York City, which is... you know, obviously, like I said, a monthly event, which everyone who's watching or listening should come to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a great way to network with the New York photo community.
Many friendships that come out of that.
Indeed. And then additionally, so you work locally at the Riverdale Press up in the Bronx.
Up in the Bronx.
Up in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And you are the chief photographer.
I am.
And how long have you been working there?
It'll be a year in April.
A year in April? Oh, okay. So this is a relatively new move. I didn't realize that. I thought you were there for a little bit longer.
No.
Okay, cool. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about this transition into a staff job, because you've been a freelancer before then, and we'll talk about your career and you know, studies and so on. But before we start, I just want to give a quick shout out and a thank you to Adorama for letting us use their event space, as always, to Canon Professional Services and Temba Bags for all your support, as well as Lacey. Hard drives. Okay. So Julius, let's talk a little bit about, so I've got some photos. This is before you started at Riverdale, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start going through some of your work here. And you did some traveling, refugee camps and so on. Can you talk a little bit about what we're looking at and the type of work that you've done in the past?
Yeah. So these particular images are from 2 years ago in 2016. I was living in Istanbul at the time. I had moved there in 2015. And around end of February, there wasn't really much going on in Istanbul, and things were heating up in Greece. And so I essentially made the decision to go to see what was happening. I'm half Greek by heritage, so to know that something was happening so close, that's part of my history. I wanted to see firsthand what was going on.
Right.
And initially I had planned to go to Athens because there were some things happening in Athens, but the day I got there, refugees had tried to break through the border in the north, so I took a plane that night, went to the north, and then spent a couple of weeks there, and then had returned a short while after that. So these pictures are from essentially sort of in between assignments I was working on for a couple of different publications.
Okay, so you were freelancing.
Yes.
What kind of assignments were you working on?
So I went into the situation cold. I didn't know what was happening, and I kind of found things as I was going along. Like, one of the things I realized really early on was that there was a Wi-Fi connection in the camp.
Oh, interesting.
And this is in the middle of farmland. I mean, it's a farming village of 150 people, and by the time the border had closed, it had swelled to about 15,000. But I'm wondering, what is their Wi-Fi signal doing in the middle of nowhere?
Right.
And through talking to people and trying to find out who was responsible, I met the Greek electrical engineer who had essentially built the Wi-Fi infrastructure, and followed him around for like 2 days and wrote the story about his efforts, which was published in Mashable. Around that time. So a lot of like volunteer efforts and the refugee experience, what was going on, and then just sort of taking pictures as I was going along. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's the best way to go, just kind of jump into a place and sort of experience it firsthand. I mean, I've done that a few times, not like this where, you know, refugee type camps and so on, but different countries and yada yada, so on. So what was it like being in a camp like this? Did people like notice you taking pictures? Was there a lot of press? How do you gain these people's trust to sort of just walk around this camp and make images?
What made this particular place unique was that it wasn't like a formal sort of like official refugee camp that was like run by the military. This was sort of like a hot spot that sort of built up organically, because it was the main through point for people essentially taking the Balkan route towards Germany. So all you had to do really was just kind of show up, get out of your car or taxi or whatever it is you used to get there, and essentially walk around. And, you know, for the first couple of days, a lot of it was just sort of taking the scene in and seeing what people were dealing with, and then you know, slowly start talking to people and really sort of taking your time with them. I mean, there were all kinds of people there. There were wire guys, there were newspaper people, TV people, radio people, like all sorts. I mean, it was a media storm over there, essentially.
Right.
But I didn't go in with like an assignment.
Gotcha.
I went in there to kind of like get a sense of like what it was like on the ground.
Right.
I didn't go in thinking I'm going to do 15 stories. I went in thinking, what's happening?
What's happening? Just document what's around me.
Yeah.
Did these images end up running anywhere?
Some of them did. A couple of them in this particular edit ran in a couple of stories I did for Quartz at the time, but most of these essentially live on my website.
Gotcha. So we're swapping now.
Sure.
We're now in Turkey, right?
Yes, Istanbul.
And tell me how you ended up going here and
Sure.
why and so on.
Yeah, so I mean, love and work brought me to Istanbul, and for the 2 years that I was there, 2015 and 2016, it was going through a period of it was a tremendous sort of political change, political ground shift in terms of what was happening in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And as you might have heard, there was an attempted coup.
Yep.
In 2016. So this particular body of work came in the month following the coup, when the government had essentially consolidated the fallout from the coup into a push for national unity.
Mm-hmm.
So there were, every night for about a month, there were these nightly, essentially like what they called pro-democracy rallies, which were essentially pro-government rallies.
Right.
And this had culminated in a rally that was, they estimated between 1 million and 3 million people. It was just gargantuan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I, at the time, I mean, I was officially registered as press, but I didn't register for that particular rally
Mm-hmm.
as press in time. So, and I wanted to see it. So these particular images that we have up right now, I had taken with my phones because I didn't want to give any external signifiers going in as technically a civilian.
Yeah.
So these phone images are essentially the experience of being in this place that was just so dense.
Wow. And you don't speak the language.
I speak, well, I mean, I have remnants of it, but at the time I spoke baseline Turkish. I could,
So
I could kind of get around. I could, order food in a restaurant.
Gotcha.
I couldn't hold long political discussions, but sort of like basic question and answer things.
Gotcha.
I had a feeling for.
And you said you lived there for a couple years?
Yeah, about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's jump in as we finish looking
Sure.
at these photos. Let's go back to how did you get into photojournalism?
Sure.
Did you go to school for it?
Yeah, so I went, photography's kind of been in my family for like 3 or 4 generations, going back to like the late 1800s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's always been kind of like a part of my life sort of growing up. And I had taken up photography as kind of a hobby around 2009 when I had found my grandfather's old black Tenba bag.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it had 2 film cameras in it, a Pentax K1000 and an Olympus OM77AF. And my not knowing anything, the one that was slightly more electronic and being a child of the digital age,
Right.
that one looked a little more welcoming.
Right.
So I took it out of the bag, got a roll of film from like the local Duane Reader Walgreens, and just sort of started taking pictures. And that was that way for a bunch of years. And it wasn't until after I graduated college and was trying to figure out what am I going to do. And the 2 things I love are photography and writing.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the perfect marriage of that seemed to be journalism, photojournalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone to the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, where I'd gotten my degree in 2014. And that's also part of what helped me get to Istanbul.
I see.
Yeah.
CUNY is a really cool, facility.
Yeah. No, it's very sleek.
I've been there, I think, once or twice, and I went for the New York Times portfolio reviews.
Right.
I wasn't getting reviewed. I just went to help out. And, man, I couldn't believe the facility that they have. I mean, and it's right in Times Square, too.
Yeah.
Used to be right across from the New York Times. Now it's a block away, maybe?
No,
or
it's
maybe
still on the same block as the Times.
Yeah, never mind. I'm thinking of the old.
As far as
back
I know.
back in my day.
Back in your day.
New York Times was 2 blocks further down.
Okay. No.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you graduated from there. You got a degree in journalism.
Yeah.
Okay, but that was before getting into photo, or did you?
I knew that I wanted to do photo. I just I knew how to work a camera. I knew how to expose and compose and whatever else. But in terms of story and understanding what that was, I got all of that at CUNY.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so let's jump now.
Sure.
How did you make this transition from I guess, freelancing, going through school and stuff, to becoming a staff photographer last year at a single staffed photographer's paper. So you are the main, you're the chief photographer, which means you run the show.
Essentially.
And you're also the only staff photographer.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a hybrid.
How did that come about?
Yeah. So I got back to New York in late 2016, and I was freelancing, but I was also, I was also looking for opportunities.
Right.
And it was actually through CUNY that I ended up getting the job.
Okay. So it was a
Press.
direct relation there.
I happened to be there on a day when there was sort of a community news fair, and I went in and I met with the editor, and we talked. She said she was looking for a photographer, and then,
I just want to bring up the Riverdale Press here. It's online. Did you say you brought a couple papers?
Yeah, they're in my bag over there. I can go get them. But.
Well, whatever. They look like regular newspapers, right? Okay.
Yeah.
You get stuff on it. So Riverdale Press, it's up in the Bronx. You serve the community up there, right? So what's the circulation?
I don't know exactly what the circulation numbers are, but it's substantial. I mean, it's one of the largest community newspapers, I think, in the city.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
that's great. And then you can go and you can search your name, because you also do some writing for the Riverdale Press. Usually on like a photo-related story, because I saw you did stuff on June Lee. As well.
So I mean, I've written about some exhibitions. I had a story just come out on Arlene Gottfried's show. I wrote about June Lee's exhibit at the Bronx Documentary Center. But the stories I've done for the paper are less about specific photo-related things than they are like actual stories. So for instance, with this story, I'd spent a couple of weeks at a mosque in the community. Just sort of getting to know the folks there, and I'd been there during Ramadan and shared an iftar with them, and it was just sort of writing about that experience, particularly since it's the first Ramadan during the current administration. And,
I see,
and what that was like, and for them, ultimately, it didn't matter who's in office, because traditions are going to last longer than, any given leader.
I should also, since you're talking about. Let's see here. You also do some work. You excuse me. I just hit print.
Okay.
I just hit print. I was going to print this page here. So for Everyday Muslim, which is an Instagram account. It's also on Facebook, I imagine.
I think so.
Yeah. So you, and along with other contributors contribute to this. Is this regular, or did it start after you had put up that story?
No, I mean, so I had known about it since early last year, and they it's kind of like a hashtag driven thing, where if you're a follower and you take images that are related to the mission of the Instagram account, you could hashtag it, hashtag an image Everyday American Muslim.
Gotcha.
And some of mine got picked up, and then around, I think it was like September or October, they put out a call for new contributors.
Right.
And so I'd sent in essentially a couple of paragraphs, told them the kinds of stories I'm working on, and I eventually found out, much to my delight, that they named me along with a couple others as new contributors.
Cool. Very cool. So I'm wanting to jump in, because I'm realizing I have 18% of my battery. I'm at a camera store, but I don't have a charger.
Totally
so
cool.
What I'm going to do is go through this last little story here that you had given me, which is pretty fun.
Yes.
Let's talk about your cat story.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the cat story.
So you went in and you kind of shot this, looks like sort of direct flash action, like let's get in there and freak out some kittens. So what's this?
Something like that.
What is this? This is a...
So what had happened was, back in July, I had seen a Facebook event for what was deemed a cat party at the back of a bar in Brooklyn.
Right.
And I was fascinated, partly because I'd lived in Istanbul for 2 years, and for those who have been there, you know that it's like the cat capital of the world. It's just cats throughout the city, in people's homes, on the street. So to see that there was an event that was both trying to get people to adopt cats, but also encouraging cat owners to bring their cats to the back of a bar, which, if you know cats, they're not inherently social creatures. I reached out. I said, I'm interested. I'm a photojournalist. I'd love to come and document what you guys are doing. And so they invited me, and I spent the entire time of the event there. And there were a couple images I took where I realized there might be something here. And so a friend of mine had clued me into the fact that in a couple of weeks from the time of this event, that there was going to be a cat fashion show at a hotel.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, I got to go photograph that too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd done that, and then it just became this sort of search for different cat-related events. I'd been to other cat parties. I'd spent time at a cat cafe.
There's also, like, I think a thing at Madison Square Garden once a year, like a
something. Yeah, I'm still learning about all the, all the aspects of this sort of community that are happening.
But this story was about sort of like cat people.
Yeah, cats, their owners, sort of the culture around it. This isn't just like, cats in somebody's apartment. These are people who are really into cats.
Mm-hmm.
Dress up like cats, that kind of thing.
What's funny is I was just talking to someone, these cat ears. Lady Gaga started this like fashion trend like 4 or 5 years ago with cat ears,
right?
Like this, exactly like this. And I was photographing a big event which she was presenting at, and she comes out with her whole crew wearing these cat ears.
Oh God.
So maybe that's an in for you to start shooting Gaga.
It might be an in to start shooting Gaga. I mean, they're kind of everywhere. The cat ears, you see these people wearing headphones that are these giant things, and they have cat ears on them for whatever reason. But this was ultimately published on the Lens blog back in December.
Oh, that's right. No, I remember that. Cool. The New York Times Lens blog. So you did you submit it to them, or they see it somewhere? How does someone kind of make that happen? That connection with the Lens blog?
I think. I mean, there are many roads to Mecca. My particular one was that I
shot a bunch of cats.
I shot a bunch of cats, and I had met with Jim Estrin, the editor of the Lens blog, sort of halfway along the process, and I'd shown him the work, and he said, this is good, and he said, but you definitely need to shoot more events, and so I kept looking, and then I submitted a super wide edit to him, and then came out in the Lens blog, and then was in the Sunday Metro section of the Times the same weekend, and
nice. Well, that's cool. Awesome. Well, I'm glad we got through these photos before my computer goes dead.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, the business of photography. You are a staffer now, like I said, but you also do some freelance work.
I do some freelance.
So you've got some flexibility. It's not like you're, the only thing that you can do is work for them.
Right.
Do you? I mean, that's a good situation. I mean, because one of the main problems of shooting for a staff is that you usually are locked down. You have to work for them only every day, which you do. Obviously.
No, I do.
I mean, you're even in the city. You're going to be shooting a couple assignments here in the city after this. But it usually locks you down so that you can't really shoot much more.
Right.
So, were you shooting a lot of freelance before going to the Riverdale Press? Yeah, and it's mostly like weddings and so on.
I'd done weddings. I worked for other community publications. I'd published a story with BuzzFeed a year ago. I'd published with other online outlets. So I'd been shooting going into the staff position, and also, just to keep my own sort of personal projects going. You got to make time for the stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
So
gotcha. And then in terms of I guess, here's another question for you about the Riverdale Press. So when I first started in photography, it was at a local, chief photographer type situation. It was in Athens, Ohio. I went to high school there, and I got an internship in high school to work there, mixed chemicals back then. And
of course.
Started doing some shoots. Do you guys offer internships? Do you get the chance 100%. To mentor people and stuff like that?
I had an amazing photo intern back in the fall, Julius Constantine, who actually graduated from CUNY.
Oh, okay.
My alma mater. And we have like a roster of freelancers in the community for shooting. I shoot essentially like 80 to 85 to 90% of the paper.
Okay.
And then for stuff that I can't get to, if it's a conflicting time or whatever, I need to sleep.
Right. Yeah.
I have people I can reach out to and say, hey, can you shoot this game on Sunday? Can you do this thing on a Friday?
Is it a lot of sports you do?
It's sports. I shoot politics stories. I shoot education, arts and culture, all sorts. Each reporter has their beat, and I'm shooting for all their beats.
Gotcha.
So I'm going around the community like most days of the week.
Right.
Yeah.
Are the subjects that you're shooting up in Riverdale the type of things that you see yourself like? Do you find a lot of joy in covering the community type sports?
I mean it's
because I mean you went from one extreme to the other.
Well,
shooting.
I mean, it's a spectrum of experience, but what makes working at a place like the Riverdale Press sort of rewarding and fascinating and interesting is that it's a publication that has a direct relationship with the community it serves.
Right.
So like when I was doing stuff abroad, I'd publish a story with Quartz or Mashable. It was meaningful work, and but I'm essentially saying to someone, across the ocean, here's what's happening over here.
Right.
But there's very little sort of call and response. But here at the paper, say we do a story, and it affects the community.
Mm-hmm.
They respond, and then that informs our coverage. So it's sort of this symbiotic relationship between the two that always sort of makes it interesting.
And you're probably often working with a reporter.
Yes.
Which is a lot different because you're not doing the reporting yourself from...
No, but sometimes I compliment the reporting. I'll ask questions that I think aren't being asked because in the course of my career, I've reported, written, and photographed stories.
Right.
So and having graduated from a journalism program, I have a foundation in those essentials. So
gotcha.
Oftentimes when I'm out with the reporter, it's kind of a collaborative experience.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the best way.
Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, obviously, as a photographer, we see things that a reporter might not see. You
sure.
spend a little bit more time. You're really visually evidencing
right.
Whatever the story is.
Right.
So what's sort of your I mean, you're there. You've been there for a year. Like I said, I thought it was a little bit longer. So
it'll be here in April. Early April.
Do you what's sort of your 5-year plan? What's your 5-year plan?
What's my 5-year plan?
Tell me.
Thank you, career counselor. No, I don't know. I mean, it's good work, and I'm enjoying it. I mean, long haul, I would love to be able to get back abroad, and do stories there. I mean, when I was working in Greece, it really felt like I finally hit on something,
mm-hmm.
Work that moved me and mattered, and it was the first time in the course of my experience that I felt like I was really not on the front lines of a war, but I was witnessing history as it happened.
Right.
It was like a tiny slice of this huge moment in sort of global history. I mean, the refugee migration, the refugee crisis. I mean, and I was witnessing it sort of in flux as I was living in Istanbul, but then to see it more directly in Greece. So I mean, ideally later on, I'd love to be able to, get back overseas. But, I'm here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this transformation you've made in the last little bit of time, because you've lost some weight. You're looking good.
Thank you. About 24 pounds.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's important. Photographers, we sometimes tend to put on some poundage.
I have done a fair bit of that in my time.
Got a little bit on me right here. So you just started doing just working out and getting more active.
Yeah, I mean, it's self-care essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's a combination of the gym 3 to 4 times a week, and also, I mean, I'm on Weight Watchers.
Oh, okay. I got to put you in touch with someone. Someone just posted on Facebook. They're doing a story on Weight Watcher type stuff.
Yeah,
and they were looking for people that are doing the Weight Watcher program.
Well, happy
so I'm
to
going
talk
to get you in
that
touch.
Sounds good. But it's essentially just I'm taking care of myself, so I just, by virtue of existing, I feel better.
Yeah.
And able to tolerate it much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's amazing. What you had said something on Facebook, what was it, 100 quarter pounders?
88 quarter pounders with cheese, or for my French friends, 88 Royales with cheese, which is Pulp Fiction.
Right.
Throwback reference.
Yes, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, cool. So I guess lastly, would you have
Sure.
any advice for folks that are following in your footsteps?
Sure.
People that might want to get into the visual journalism world. Obviously you started in straight journalism. You got into visual journalism. You went to CUNY.
Yeah.
What steps they might want to take to sort of achieve what it is that you have, which is a job. It's hard.
Well,
it's actually hard to get a job.
It is hard to get a job. I mean, just figure out the ways in which you can get closer to what it is, you ultimately want to do. Look at great photography historically. Find work that moves you. Find the stuff that you enjoy shooting,
mm-hmm.
And just sort of, keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, with time and practice, you get better. I mean, if you'd have talked to me 3 years ago, we would not be having this conversation because I was so green. But with time and experience and sort of developing a network within the photo community, I mean, you know, you'll get places ultimately. And, you know, if you need to go to a graduate program, go to a graduate program. I wouldn't be sitting here had I not gone to CUNY. I mean, there are many great graduate programs, but for me, CUNY was the one that came through and ultimately worked. So, I mean, it takes time and patience, and I mean, you know, give yourself a break sometimes in terms of like not being too hard on yourself, because you know, it's a process, and there are growing pains, but you know, ultimately, if you're committed to the path and you know, you have at least a baseline knowledge of what you're doing, I mean, you'll get there.
So I should mention, looking at photographers that inspire you. We actually, last time we saw each other was in the midst of a legend. Robert Frank. There was a special group portrait that took place on the Lower East Side. And you've actually, I'm trying to get him on the podcast.
That would be.
We'll have to do a remote one if we do it.
Probably.
But this was your second year going.
Yeah, the first one was last year.
The first one was last year, and you were invited, and you just sort of got to witness things.
Yes.
And you took a picture, and you ended up going to his home and chatting for a bit. How was that? You know,
it was. I've had a few like really fortunate experiences where I've had the chance to meet some of my heroes. Like I met Kudelka on a street in Istanbul. He just sort of wandered up to a bus stop, and I was with a group of photographers we were going to a photo festival, and he was presenting that evening, and he didn't know where he was going, so he just asked us for directions, and a friend leaned into me and said, "That's Joseph Kudelka," and the rest of us were like, "That's not Joseph Kudelka." And we looked, and it was Joseph Kudelka, and we rode the bus with Joseph Kudelka. But with Robert Frank, I mean, you know, these guys sort of exist sort of like in the ether of like the popular photographic imagination. Like you forget that there's an actual person behind this work, you know? So when I had taken a photograph of him and June Leaf, he had his arm around her, he was holding his cane, and he was adjusting his camera, and it was like a real moment between them. And I wanted to find some way to give it to them. And I was able to, a friend of mine, essentially, who knows Robert, made it possible. And I spent about 45 minutes to an hour with him in his home, just talking. You know, I'm sure there are photographers who have given him prints in the past, but I wasn't really interested in giving him one of my prints. I wanted to give him a photo of him and his wife, and it you know, it was like a real, you know, wonderful thing that had happened.
I actually have a few seconds left of battery. I'll pull it up, but this was last time when we were there.
Right, a couple of weeks ago, I think.
Any shots, but we got lots of friends that showed up.
Oh my God,
And we all sort of hung out at the corner, and then went to the front of his home when he came out and greeted everyone for the group photo. But it was really pretty cool to be in his midst, and you know, he's an old man. I think he's 92 or 93 years old.
93, 94,
yeah. So everyone was walking by taking pictures,
not knowing what. I'm in that photo with the yellow hat.
Oh yeah, there you are. Yeah, you were taking the one of the group shots. That's great. So yeah, he's clearly loved, and
undoubtedly. I mean, the work is foundational.
Right.
I mean, it's informed
June,
my work.
I'm
sure it's informed everybody's work who's in this business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast and chatting with me about your career and life and so on. Your social presence online, what's your like Instagram and so on?
Instagram at Julius Motal Photo.
Julius Motal Photo.
Yeah.
Okay. And people can catch you on Facebook, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate it, and
thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to Next Beer and Wings, which is coming up.
Definitely.
Next week,
Next week, Monday.
So you'll be there?
I'll be there.
You better be there.
I'll be there.
Great seeing you, Julius.
Lovely
Great
seeing
chatting
you,
with you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Have a good time. See you next time.